Welcome to our Ask Android Widgets AMA. I'm Summers Pittman, a developer relations engineer here at Google, and I'm joined by our panel of Brenton Beatty, a software engineer, and Andre Labonte, product manager, David Wilson, interaction designer, Lucas Silva, software engineer, and Tyler Beneke, product manager. We're looking forward to answering your questions in this live AMA, so let's get started. Our first question is, what are widgets and what can they do? So widgets are a small piece of your application that can be embedded in the user's home screen. They're built on top of remote views, and these remote views allow your users to interact with your content and your widget without your application actually being running. All right, so with that out of the way, let's get some more questions. Share some examples of successful widgets that have significantly improved user engagement or provided unique value. Andre, would you like to take that one?
One of my favorite widgets is actually the Google Contacts widget. And what they've done that's really interesting is not only have they made it easier for you to communicate with the people that you want to communicate with most, they've actually aggregated a lot of the notifications that you're getting from this person. So they're doing some really great work in facilitating communicating with the people you care about. And they've made some great changes, and they're seeing some great adoption with their new features. We're really excited to see how they evolve the widget.
Thanks. When will lock screen widgets be available? Oh, Tyler, I think this one's yours.
Yeah, happy to take it. So lock screen widgets are going to be available in AOSP for tablets and mobile, starting with the release after Android 16. So we call this QPR1. So this is scheduled to be pushed to AOSP in late summer 2025. And then just to note that lock screen widgets have already been on the Pixel tablet since Q4 of 2024.
Thanks, Tyler. How can developers ensure their widgets are accessible to all users, including those with disabilities? What specific accessibility guidelines or tools do you recommend for widget development? David, I think you and Brenton can take that.
Yeah, I can start. So I guess a couple of things I'd probably recommend focusing on would be accessible tap targets. So making sure any sort of buttons or any elements that the user can tap within the widget is at least sort of 48 dp high. On top of that, I think color contrast is another consideration. So recommend using some of the material color tokens, which kind of guarantees accessible color contrast in both light and dark themes. And both of these kind of capabilities are built into our canonical layouts, which basically include breakpoints, color contrast tokens. Everything's kind of in there, and accessible tap targets. So using those at least as a starting point will help set you on the right path.
Android also has some developer tools and accessibility tools that could be helpful. One would be using TalkBack to make sure that you can navigate your widget using the screen reader, and then also setting your screen color profile to make sure that the widget can be usable without relying entirely on colors as cues. For example, if destructive action's only indication was that it was red, that could be difficult for somebody with red-green color blindness.
I could also jump in actually with one more there. Sorry, just when it comes to like the accessible tap targets, and I mentioned breakpoints before. I think with that, it's actually useful to use breakpoints to kind of show and hide content as a user resizes a widget. So rather than trying to like cram all the information into a small size and therefore probably making buttons or text too small, you can really leverage breakpoints to adapt the layout so you can bring in those accessible tap targets when there's sufficient space. So that's just another thing to think about is using breakpoints to improve the layout that way.
And I guess last thing is the Glance component library that we provide. The buttons are going to be accessibly sized. So in the Glance Material 3 package, we have a number of different material buttons that can be used.
Are there any specific requirements for widgets to be allowed on the lock screen? Lucas, would you like this?
Yeah, so no, there are no specific requirements. Any requirements for the widget to be on the home screen also applies to the lock screen. These include like quality, size, and stability. Some maybe special considerations that you might want to have, such as thinking about whether the widget belongs in a pre-authentication space and if you want, what actions you want to allow the user to take before they authenticate into the device.
What are key considerations for integrating widget development into an existing app's release cycle? Would our product managers want to take this? Or is this a software question?
I can definitely talk about it from a software point of view. I would say the biggest thing is that the widget is just another feature in your app. So not treating it as a special case would be a good first step. I would say it could be tempting, especially in the past. I've seen widgets that seem like an afterthought to an app. I would treat them as part of your app's designs. So in Figma, like have them use similar or the same design system components as the rest of your app. When you write in Glance, you're going to be writing in code that looks like Jetpack Compose, so you can translate the concepts from your app's main UI over into the widget. I'm a big fan of modularization, so I'd probably put the widget in its own module, but otherwise treat it from a data flow point of view as a part of the app. When your app gets updates, push updates to the widget, and have it share constants such as like color themes, tokens, icons with the rest of the app so that your UI is consistent. And then just iterate on it until it's done, and then keep it up to date the same way you would any other feature.
How do lock screen widgets work if my tablet is locked? Lucas and Tyler, would you two like to have this one?
Yeah, I'm happy to take a swing at it. So if your tablet is locked, some widgets have inline actions. I think good examples of this are the Google Home app widget, where you can turn on and off lights directly from that widget from the lock screen, or the timers, where you can go ahead and set a timer without having to authenticate. But generally, if you want to go to the native app, you still have to authenticate just for privacy reasons. So yeah, I think it's a little bit of both, some short inline actions with less depth, but then also able to go ahead and enter into the app as long as you authenticate. Lucas, anything you'd add to that?
Yeah, so it's really your choice as the developer, like what you want to allow over the lock screen or not. So there's this configuration in Android called show when locked to allow an activity to show over the lock screen. And so if your widget is starting an activity that has that attribute, then we won't prompt for authentication, and we'll show your activity on top of the lock screen. But if your activity doesn't have that, then as soon as the user taps your widget, then we'll prompt for authentication. And then anything you want to do in the background, like if you want to start a service or anything, that doesn't require authentication. So you could imagine like a media widget or something playing music in the background without needing to authenticate.
Thank you, guys. Will you fix the problem of widgets from different apps not aligning properly with the home screen grid? So this touches all of us, and I'm going to start with saying we've published a lot of content during Spotlight Week to talk about our widget quality tiers and widget quality design. So I would start by looking at the blogs we published on Tuesday. We also have canonical widgets, which are designed for providing a starting point of widgets that align with the bounding boxes of your lock screen, of your home screen, as well as providing reasonable breakpoints so that they resize and reflow your content correctly. And I think I'll pass it off to David and Brenton for more information about how you can make your widgets align with the grid properly.
Like I think you kind of covered it, to be honest, Summers. But I think the principle around filling the bounds is something we're really keen to see in widgets. So I think there's a lot of examples out there where widgets maybe aren't taking up the entire space that a user is dedicated for it on their home screen grid. It's actually really easy to do, and like as Summer said, the canonical layouts can give you a really good head start with that. Again, using breakpoints. Again, thinking about how the content can kind of grow and shrink as the user resizes the widget. But really, we want all widgets to kind of fill the entire space and so that the user doesn't feel like there's wasted space on their home screen. So it's something we're pushing hard for, and we're really keen to see developers sort of take that on and improve the quality of the widget that way.
We also have in Glance a top-level component called Scaffold, which can make it easier to get started with building a widget that fills the bounds. If you use Scaffold, it's going to give you a good background color, a full-sized frame, and it also has a slot API where you can put a title bar if that's a part of your widget's design.
All right. Are there any plans for stackable widgets in Android? Andre, would you like to take this one?
Sure. As some of you might have noticed, stackable widgets are possible on some Android manufacturers' devices. And this is something that we are looking into from AOSP. We are getting these requests a lot. So stay tuned. We aren't committed to this yet, but keep asking and we'll work on it.
Thank you. How do you balance the need for concise information in a widget with providing a meaningful user interaction? David, would you like to talk?
Sure. Yeah, I guess what we see is like a common pitfall that happens is that you try to cram too much sort of functionality or features or functions into the widget itself. Like we don't anticipate that widgets should be like a direct replica of what happens inside the app itself. We're not trying to recreate the app UI and the user's home screen. So I think trying to be mindful, and I think a good kind of rule of thumb is to think about any one widget should focus on solving one critical user journey for a user. So maybe if you wanted to add multiple features, or you want more functionality on the user's home screen, or giving them that choice, maybe consider multiple widgets that do sort of like one thing really well. And also users will appreciate that choice, right? The ability to take the elements of the app, of those features, pick and choose which ones they want to have accessible on their home screen. So yeah, that's how I would kind of think about it. Do one thing well.
I would also add that having a tight collaboration between design and development is important. Just having that feedback loop of designer coming up with an idea, talking with the developer about like, what can we fit here? What are the guidelines? Developers should be able to answer the designer's questions, provide feedback on like the accessibility of it, but just having a good relationship where you guys can iterate on the design and try different things is a good way. Like a lot of what we do is just the result of a lot of back and forth and lots of work and thinking about the problem.
Right. Widgets often display dynamic data. What are your recommendations for ensuring data consistency between the app and the widget? Brenton, I think this is yours.
Yeah, I would say the good first step would be don't think of the widget as something other than your app. The widget is a part of your app and it is a view or a front end into your app. So when you get new data, you can call glance app widget.update to send to create and send a new set of remote views to the remote views host, which will update your widget. So that's good if your app is in the foreground and fetching data. If your app is in the background and it already does fetches using Work Manager, just making sure when you do a fetch like that you update the app widget will ensure that your data is fresh. If you have an app that does not already have a background service, but you want to update your widget, we recommend using Work Manager to schedule those updates. And that is a way to just get consistency and also good battery performance.
Thank you. Does the device need to be docked to use lock screen widgets? Lucas and Tyler, these are yours.
I can start out on this one. So the answer is no. While we've made that decision for Pixel, really this is a configurable option for the OEM. So you don't need to be in any way like device or charging or docked or upright, even though that can be a trigger mechanism for your device. So really the option is up to the OEM. But Lucas, anything you would like to add there?
No, I think you really covered it.
Okay, good deal.
What are the best practices for providing users with meaningful configuration options for their widgets? David and Brenton?
Yeah, again, I can start here. So I think providing some form of configuration for widgets is a really good way to, often cases is allowing users to control maybe the aesthetic properties of the widget, like changing the shape of a clock or even the kind of style of a clock or something like that. And it applies another layer sort of customization in that. I'd be mindful about how much configuration options you put in there. it might be the case that some widgets, can provide more options than others, but especially if it's like a configuration that you want to serve up to the user as they place the widget on the home screen, I think sometimes that can be overwhelming, and might put the user off going through those steps. So I think, just trying to be mindful about how many options you put in front of the user up front when they just want to see the widget land on their home screen, right? And then maybe make decisions at a later time.
Pretty much that. I think the older pattern was to pop up a configuration activity when you put the widget down, and we're encouraging people to move away from that, to just have a good zero state for your widget, and be able to allow the user to start using it right away.
What is the fastest way to build a home screen widget that my users will engage with and keep on their home screen? Open for the table. All right, Brenton.
I'm pretty biased to Glance. It's one of the reasons I joined the team. I did not enjoy writing widgets prior to working on the Glance team. I did not like remote views, and I certainly had no interest in writing widgets. And when I tried Glance out, when I was looking to team match, I discovered I could write a widget really, really fast. And that has had me hooked. So 100% recommend Glance. Like, the library makes the process a lot easier. It lets you focus on making good UI and good user interactions, and it's much more intuitive. We try our best to abstract out the more challenging parts of remote views so that you can focus on just getting a UI out the door. If you look at our samples, especially the canonical layouts, you can see fairly complex UI behaviors using breakpoints that do not use much code at all. And they don't have much duplicated code either. Everything can be broken down into small composables and then arranged as needed for a certain configuration.
Just to add to that,
go ahead, Andre.
We've been doing a lot of work to understand really what makes a good widget, and so that users do keep them on their home screens and stay engaged. And those are represented in the quality tiers that we've published recently, and we've incorporated the quality tiers into the canonical layouts that Brenton has mentioned. So starting with the canonical layouts is probably the best place, and there's some great Figma tooling there as well for you to work with your designer to really visualize your content in there as well.
Can we lean on Android's interactive widget patterns to design an engaging widget? Yeah, these are great questions. These are canonical layouts. These are from our design guidance that we've published. So yes, you can lean on those. And David and Brenton, would you like to follow up more?
Yeah, so like the widgets themselves obviously have the ability to have interactive actions on there. Quite often we've seen, I guess in most cases, performing an action on a widget would often then take you into the app. There are interesting examples out there, like the Google Tasks app would be a good one, where you've got like a to-do list or something like that. They've added the ability to sort of add like a new task in line by essentially like rendering an activity on top of Launcher, so the user still feels like they're in the context of the widget on Launcher, but they're able to actually add an additional item in there. I think that's quite an interesting way to approach slightly more complex tasks. And it'd be cool to see what other developers would want to do with something similar like that. So yeah, I definitely recommend checking out the tasks widget for that reason. And yeah, I think that's like a way of sort of extending the capabilities of widgets.
The only thing I'll add to that is, one, canonical layouts are a good example, and two, we have additional examples in the Glance source code for how different types of actions can work. We try to keep the source code fairly easy to follow. So if you're curious about the different ways a user can send interactions back to the host application, or what the reason for using, say, lambdas versus our action class are, you can find that out in the source code if you need deeper answers.
When will shimmer effect and font typecasting be available in Widget? Open to the table.
I think what they're asking.
Go ahead.
Yeah, please go ahead.
We don't do much with animation right now, but we do have channels where if you have features that you want, you can request them. Filing bugs is a great way to get your feature requests directly to us. So file a bug and say just kind of what you're looking for, how you'd like to use it, and be as detailed as possible.
Will Android ever allow Jetpack Compose on widget? Are we still required to use XML? Hashtag ask Android. So congratulations. Glance is how you can use Jetpack Compose style API to write widgets. We have some excellent tooling and excellent videos that we've linked and shared during Spotlight Week. So I would say start with those resources. You are not required to use XML if you are using an image preview, which is supported before Android 12, or if you're using generated previews, which is supported in Android 15 and onward. Between Android 12 and 15, we do have support for using XMLs to do your preview layout, and that will get you dynamic color and night mode theme updates in your widget preview before Android 15. After Android 15, you'd want to use a generated preview that can be provided using your Glance composables. Brenton, would you like to follow up on that?
Yeah, I'll just add, Glance uses the Jetpack Compose runtime, but it does not use the Jetpack Compose actual UI elements. So if the question is, will we be able to use full-blown Jetpack Compose as used to make main phone like activity UIs? The answer is no. But if you're wondering, can we use Compose syntax? That is what Glance allows.
Ask Android. Is it possible to create single widget with different info based on device, like phone, tablet, and fold? Brenton?
Yeah, if you use responsive layouts, that'd probably be, I think, like what the question is getting to. We've made sample widgets that can scale from anywhere like a 1x1 on the grid up to tablet size. And that's a case where having your information broken into small composable functions that you then combine together in kind of like a top level layout really comes in handy. It's a good use case to work with your designer to try to build a widget that is made up of a lot of small individual pieces that can be reused.
When will the map be available in widget? Is this asking about, I wonder if this is asking about if like there's a map object. I know that last year we did some work with embedding maps in the widget, but you can use a image to get the map image and then show that in the widget. Brenton and David, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I would say if the question is like, how do you display, say, a pin on a map? We don't have any plans to actually add like a Google Maps style API to remote views. But if you have the ability to render a map in your app's host process, the bitmap and canvas APIs are a really good way to get around any remote views limitations. So if you needed to display a location, you'd render that into a canvas. You could then put a pin or any other annotations on top of it and send that bitmap over in an image composable to the widget. The one other thing to watch out for, though, is there is a hard size limit on how big a remote views object can be. You're not going to hit that with just a single image, but if you, say, had a list view with lots of images, that could be a concern. So don't, just be careful to profile your app when you're sending remote view data with bitmaps over.
Ask Android. Widget only get updated at some particular time only. Is there any way I can update it every second, for example, a countdown widget?
We have a chronometer class that can be used for countdowns. Chronometer is what Stopwatch uses. and it's a view with a countdown animation inside of it. We really do not suggest updating widgets every second directly from your app, because that would involve a lot of recompositions, and it would be bad for system health and battery life, and it would create a lot of just churn as you send all those remote views over.
And I would like to add, if you're using Glance, there is a very good example called Socialite that uses a Glance widget to do updates between a chat application and a chat widget. And it's been designed to demonstrate best practices to ensure that your widget gets updated whenever new data comes in. Can I keep heavyweight logic in a widget? Is it recommended? Brenton?
I would not. I would look at your widget the same way I would look at a chunk of UI within an activity. I think heavyweight logic should not be in the view layer. There's better places in your app to put it. You ideally should have the data as close to pre-processed as possible before you're running your widget's composition. For the most part, I'm a big fan of unidirectional data flow, MVI. So having a view state object that comes into your widget with all the data in an kind of easy to digest form, and then mostly just focus on doing branching logic to figure out how to lay that data out. If your user is clicking buttons on the widget, again, that should probably go back to a more centralized place in the app. You don't want to be spending a lot of time in the composition phase. And there is also, I believe, a work manager hard limit on how long the composition can run for before the process gets killed off.
What are some strategies for helping users discover my widget? Andre, would you like to take this one?
Sure, I can take this one. We're really excited because Google Play earlier this week launched widget filters. So now not only can you search for apps with widgets, but from an app details page, you can actually discover that this app has widgets and discover other apps that have high quality widgets as well. So we've got these new pages in Google Play where users will be able to discover your widgets, because we've heard from you that it's really a challenge to get users to know that you've invested in your widget. Another thing that you'll want to consider is prompting users within your app to let them know that you've got a widget. So maybe they've completed a really interesting user journey, and you can actually use the request pin API, request pin app widget method actually, in order to have the user add the widget directly from inside your app. So you can actually take control of some of these discovery journeys.
All right. One major challenge I faced is that a widget may look great on one grid size, but break in another, even on the same device. Different grid settings can affect layout. How to handle this? David?
Yeah, I could probably jump in here. It is tricky. It's hard to give a specific size, right? Because we know we've got such a wide range of devices we want widgets to kind of render on, and different grid sizes that the user may have set. So it is challenging to provide values on the developer guidance that we put up recently. We do have some kind of loose guidance that can help get you started. There's also, we've mentioned a lot, the canonical layouts. You should take a look at those and see how they're put together, because we've considered that and sort of shown how the widgets can fully resize and make sure that they do the things like fill the bounds entirely as they do. But the way, whenever it comes to like designing a new widget, the way I would approach it is almost a bit more like a responsive website. Like, never really think about a particular grid cell size. I kind of start off as like try and optimize for like the smallest size, and then grow from there, and then look at where your design breaks in between, and then there are the key points where you want to add, where you add what breakpoints. There's no one size fits all, but I say that's why we created the canonical layout, to kind of give a best practice for some different content types like lists, image grids, toolbars, etc. So definitely check those out and see if that can help guide. But like I say, just make the breakpoints come in whenever your design breaks and you need to adapt your layout. I hope that helps.
Yeah, I think it does. We've got time for a few more questions. So if you're listening on YouTube, feel free to shout any questions you have right now. If you've heard anything maybe you don't know, or you want more details about something, such as lock screen widgets or Glance or any other Android widget related questions, feel free to get those in. And next question, please. How should I handle offline scenarios or slow network connections when my widget is updating? Brenton?
Yeah, I would say the first rule of thumb would be the same way you would in the main screen of your app. Try to show the most fresh data that you have. I think because users are probably expect that widgets will not update quite as instantly in many cases, you have some leeway with stale data. One thing we're not recommending is a refresh button. We think that you should use other tools that Android provides, like Work Manager, to wait until you have a network connection and then refresh data. But aside from that, if it's important to have up-to-date data, having like some sort of a piece of UI that indicates the freshness could be good.
When are you adding support for lock screen widgets on Android? Tyler, you had this earlier, but maybe someone tuned in late. Would you mind getting it again?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're making this available in Q3 of this year. And so that'll be later summer. But Lucas, do you want to add anything there since I kind of answered this one the first time?
No, the only other thing to add is it's already available today on Pixel tablet. But then, yeah, the timeline Tyler mentioned is expanding it and landing it in AOSP for other devices.
All right. Developing a great widget requires close collaborations between designers, developers, and product managers. What are some effective communication and collaboration strategies for ensuring a success? Well, good news. We have developers, designers, and product managers right here. So let's just go around the table and tell us your secrets.
I can start just from the design side, I guess. So I guess I could use the development of the canonical layouts as a prime example of like really tight collaboration across all. So I guess in our case, it was kind of defining what are the common layouts we want to tackle here. And for developers, it might be what are the key kind of CUJs we're trying to tackle with these widgets. So firstly, establishing those, and then when it comes to like from the design side, I say I go through that process I just described around trying to make a layout that kind of is responsive and fully flexible, reusing components that we now have as part of the Figma library kit. So again, hopefully this will help developers get up and running much faster. But like, there's only so much you can kind of do in Figma, right? Like we can create the layouts and kind of preview how they might look at different sizes, but it really does require close design and eng collaboration, going back and forth, testing out different layouts and previews in the Android developer console. So I'll pass that to Brenton. Actually, he could probably describe how they kind of handle that.
Yeah, I would say like for collaborating with designers, frequent meetings is good. Like getting to a point where you just let either party work in a vacuum is not super helpful. Like having a quick feedback loop, that way you guys can figure out what works, what doesn't, and then kind of like bounce ideas off each other. Building tools that can help with the specific process is also really helpful. If there's something you can do to let your designer quickly visualize different options in the widget, whether it's like different colors, sizes, or layouts, that could let them see what works and what doesn't work quickly. Yeah, just like a tight, coordinated development process where you are on frequently meeting is my preferred way to work on this sort of thing.
I could chime in here a little bit for the lock screen use case. I think really honing in on the user journeys that are important. So in the lock screen scenario, this is a pre-authentication space, and you're coming there because you want fast access to information and you want frictionless version lists like CUJs. A good example is bringing up the Google Home app again, is like turning on and off light switches. That's a really helpful thing to, one, see many of your home controls in one place, but also be able to perform a really important action with just the touch of a finger. And so I would say, thinking about the use case, and especially in the lock screen arena, like how can you make things glanceable and really easy to use and light touch?
The docs mentioned defining breakpoints, but how do you decide the right value of breakpoints and cell sizes? How do you determine the perfect widget size? So I can take this one. In DAC, we have published sizing guidance that's based on how the Pixel devices, home screens, break on different DP sizes. And so what you can do is you can take these values and then know about when they will break on the grid size. And these are kind of useful starting points for you to start adjusting your widget a little bit more. You can also use the different resource categories in Android so that for extra large screens, say, you provide a slightly different widget layout, or you provide different defaults for your widget previews. And you can also use the canonical layouts, which have a lot of this logic built in, and you can watch the code along video we did earlier this week where we adjust the values in that logic to try and hit some more design goals for a specific widget.
I would jump in and say one thing to keep in mind is there is no Android spec for grid size. It's something that is dependent on launchers, and every device can have its own launcher that it ships with, and users can install third-party launchers as well. So when building a widget, you might look at grid sizes of popular devices as a starting point, but you should assume that some users somewhere might have a completely free-form widget size. Widgets can also display on surfaces that are not the launcher. It's not common, but it's definitely doable. So really looking at your design to figure out what the natural breakpoints are, and then testing on a lot of devices, testing with different display settings, testing on the emulator is kind of the best way to go.
And Glance has a local size object that you can use to get your exact dimensions, and the documentation for that is available on developer.android.com as well. Is it possible to use animations in the widget? Brenton?
Not really. There's system health concerns with that. If animation were to run continuously on the home screen, that could be distracting to the user. It could also be a battery drain. So we don't recommend using animations on widgets generally. It's something we might reconsider in the future, but right now the guidance would be not to use animations.
Maybe it's added, but last time I used it not. When will Compose Horizontal Pager be available for widgets? Andre or Brenton?
I think one thing to note here is that, the horizontal gesture on your home screen right now currently will take you between workspaces. So I think that this is unlikely to be a pattern that we will support in widgets in the short term. But yeah.
And Brenton, you had something?
I was going to say the same thing, yeah.
Okay. Ask Android. It is very difficult to support diff locale in widget. It is not responsive. How to handle this? How do we handle locale support in widgets?
I would need to dig into that if there's like a specific bug. Like I would hope it would recompose when the locale changes. If that's not happening or you're seeing delayed behavior, please send us a bug report with reproduction information. If you can make a little sample widget that demonstrates it easily, that's even better. And we will immediately take a look at it and get back to you and fix any issues.
Glance widgets translate to Android XR. Andre, would you like to take this?
Sure, that's a great question. We're really excited about Android XR, and I think we really do see the value in having widgets in XR. We currently don't have plans to port Glance widgets, but we are really looking at building streamlined developer experiences, and so hopefully we'll be able to bridge the gap in the future. But we don't currently have any plans.
All right, and I think we have time for one more question. Any advice for migrating an existing legacy widget to Glance? I'll open this up to the table.
From a purely technical point of view, I would say it'd be a great chance for a rewrite if you've got the time to do that. We have what we call an escape hatch in Glance. It's a composable called Android Remote Views that lets you just include an existing remote view into your hierarchy. So you could start by building a simple like Hello World Glance widget just to get the basic boilerplate code down. Then you could use Android Remote View to load your existing UI into it, and then start breaking apart that existing UI into Glance composables, and then having a mixture of Glance and your old code, and then eventually get rid of the old code entirely. It would also probably be a good chance to do a design pass. We've written a lot of widget guidance in the last few years, and really tried to clarify some of the standards. So I would talk to David maybe if you have anything to add about doing like a design cleanup pass on a legacy widget.
Yeah, like it's probably one more shout out for the canonical widget layout, because I think, like I say, as part of that effort, we tried to identify some of the most common layouts that the developers were using. Like I mentioned, text and image, toolbars, list views, grid views. So and more to come. So I think take a look at those, because it might be a case that one of those canonical layouts might help you accelerate the sort of transition. And what you get out of the box, like we've talked about before, is the ability that will fill the space entirely with dynamic theming. So that would be the fastest way to kind of migrate from an old design to the new design. And like I say, it can be used as a starting point, and you can kind of tweak it from there to kind of fit your needs.
And one of the reasons that we might encourage you migrating to Glance is that Glance will be evolving, Glance will be getting new features. And so the best way to get access to these features is to start using Glance. So we encourage that.
All right, what a great question to close the show on. Tyler, Lucas, Brenton, David, and Andre, thank you so much for being here. To all of our viewers on YouTube, thank you for your questions and your time. And to everyone who's been participating in the Ask Android hashtag, thank you for your questions. We've really enjoyed answering them. I hope you enjoyed Widget Spotlight Week, and have a great rest of your day.